Let's speak to Fergus Finlay of Barnardos, who's with us in studio this afternoon. Fergus, you're welcome to the programme.
Thank you very much, John.
We've had a lot of reports into how vulnerable children have been let down. A lot of them have focused on the church in the past and how the state facilitated the church and what it was doing. But this report tomorrow is going to be different.
Well, it's going to be different in a number of ways. First of all, I should say I haven't seen it yet. I know the two people who wrote the report. You may remember, Jonathan, that this all started with a newspaper story which said that up to 200 children had died in the care of the state over the last decade. And that was immediately denied by the HSE and by the then Minister for Health. And the figure was put out that, in fact, the number was much closer to 23. I don't know why that figure stuck in my head, but that's the figure I remember.
That's a lot less than 200.
Eventually, though, it did emerge that the true number was just short of 200. Not all in the care of the state, but all of them known to the state, known to be children at risk. And the then government asked Geoffrey Shannon and Nora Gibbons to review all of the files, such as they were, in relation to all of these deaths. So it's not a historic report, except in the sense that it covers the last decade or so. It's what's happening now, and how the system is responding to children who are very, very vulnerable.
But what I get the impression of, Fergus, is that when we get the detail of this tomorrow, a lot of it we will know already. I mean, we look back on the cases we know about, people like Daniel McAnespy, who died at someone else's hand when he was in state care. The story of Tracy Fay. I remember sitting in an inquest here in Cork into the death of a young man and listening to the attempts, the desperate attempts that were made by individuals within the HSE, not by some collective decision, but by individuals to try and get them to a point in safety. I remember being shocked that the social worker in question had used her own credit card to put this young person in a hotel. Now, this is someone who was under the age of 18, but it was all she could do was to put him in a hotel. So we know the system is broken. This report is only going to confirm it, and there's nothing to suggest it has improved.
Well, I'm not even sure where to begin, Jonathan, to be honest. Yes, we know the system has been broken for a long time. We and a lot of us, I think, have made this point again and again and again. When the HSE was originally established, first of all, it was established as an enormous organisation, one of the biggest in Europe. And secondly, it was given a huge list of jobs to do. And from virtually the first moment it was established, it was involved in crisis of one kind or another. Now, I happen to know that in the first 5 years of the HSE's history, the board of the HSE never once discussed child protection. And there were members on the board of the HSE who didn't know that they had a statutory responsibility for child protection. Because
they'll explain to listeners, they're the line of last defence for the safety of children. If there is an abdication of parental responsibility or a child turns up and we don't know who their parents are, it ultimately falls not to the guards, not to individual social workers. It's the HSE that takes parental responsibility.
The law of the land says that if a child needs to be made safe for his or her, for whatever reason, if a child needs to be made safe, that it is the responsibility of the HSE to do it. As I say, that responsibility was so far down on the list of priorities of the HSE that it was effectively, almost never addressed at all. And one of the consequences of that was that you had very uneven practice right across the country, very good practice in some parts, very bad practice in others. Very, very stretched resources. Incredible, the example you gave of a social worker using her own credit card wouldn't be all that unusual. Social workers at the end of their tether a lot of the time. You had young social workers, 25, 26, 27 years of age, handling incredibly complex and difficult cases, and sometimes operating at risk to themselves. And you had no management, no consistent practice. Guidelines, they were all operating to guidelines which had never had the force of law and which are only now being given the force of law. So it's probably not surprising in a way that the system failed. Now, What I think tomorrow's report is going to tell us, and I don't know what cases it deals with specifically. All I know about the report is what's been in the newspapers already. But what I think it's going to tell us is that the system is irretrievably broken. That's the bad news. The good news is that has been recognised. There is a lot of legislative change underway. There is a constitutional referendum underway. And there is a new, a new agency being established to take this responsibility away from the HSE and to give it its own priority and its own line of political accountability.
But that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be fixed, because if you just move into a different organisation, what's to prevent the same mistakes that have been made, having well-intentioned people at the bottom of the pile, having no leadership at the top? Is there a solution that can be found?
Well, no, I think there is. I think that some of the things that have happened, like there is leadership at the top of this organisation. There is a new chief executive already in place, Gordon Jays, who has huge and positive experience of child protection in the UK. He's been brought in to provide precisely this level of leadership. A huge amount of work has been done at the level of training, at the level of better practice. New managers have been recruited. All of that is ready to go. It's up there and ready to go. Legislation is being prepared to give this new agency a proper statutory footing and also to impose real obligations on it. And there is a Minister for Children who is now, for the first time, the last Minister for Health, whose full title was the Minister for Health and Children, never answered questions in the Dáil about children. They were all just passed on to a junior minister. There is now a full cabinet-level Minister for Children. So a lot of the building blocks are in place to do it better in future and to try to ensure that we never need another report like the one being published tomorrow.
I do remember
one
speaking...
fundamental problem. Sorry, John.
Which is, what's the fundamental problem?
Well, the fundamental problem is the budget. That is a fundamental problem. My understanding is that there's a long-running battle going on between the Department of Children, the Department of Health, the HSE and the new agency about what the starting budget will be. Now, it won't be new money. It won't mean that, a new budget has to be created. It's money that comes from money already being spent by the HSE in this area. If all of the resources that the HSE presently apply to this area are put into this new agency, it will start off with a decent starting budget. But if they lose the battle over the budget, then they're going to start, with an overhang of debt, already in deficit, with a financial crisis before they even begin to do their work. And that would be just a disaster.
And children that we don't even know need help, perhaps not even having been born, are going to be those that will suffer as a result of that. Fergus Finlay, Chief Executive Officer of Barnardos, thanks very much for that, Fergus. We'll have the detail on that story tomorrow. You mentioned the fact there's a Minister for Children for the first time. There was one appointed by the government. I remember asking her soon after she came into office when we'd have that referendum on children's rights. She told us, first of all, it'll be early this year. We're now in June, still no date on when it's going to happen, but a promise of sorts that it will happen before the end of the year. That report is due to be published tomorrow by Francis Fitzgerald's department.